Welcome to the Through the Lens of Learning podcast. If we haven't met, hello, I'm your host, Dr. Tracy Schroyer. I'll give you 2 words that summarize me to a T: lifelong learner. Join me as I share a bit about my own journey of curiosity, learning, and wonder. You'll also get to hear from some phenomenal individuals on what they're curious about learning and what they have to share too. Are you itching with excitement yet? I am, so let's get started. All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of Through the Lens of Learning. And today I have an amazing guest with me, Cara North. So welcome, Cara, and thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast.
Always.
Cara, can you start out by just giving us just high level, just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am Cara North. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and I work in learning and development. So I am currently the director of learning and development at Circulo Health, and we are a company that helps provide healthcare to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So it's a really great company in the fact that it makes a difference in the world, and it kind of raises my little heart tank in that way. I'm also married. I have an awesome partner who actually works in the trucking industry, so complete opposite of
Nice.
kind of what we do, but it's cool. I'm proud pet parent of a cat named Bib Fortuna, and yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell. I really feel awkward anytime someone asks me to tell them a little bit about myself. So there you go.
I know, it's like such an open-ended question, and it's like,
Yes.
here's the way you answer it in an interview, but nobody tells you, like, outside of just a job interview, like, how do you answer that? So,
Right. Yeah.
yeah. Yep. So, Cara, before we jump into your learning journey and more of some of your formal education that you have taken, can you tell me, what does learning mean to you?
Ooh. To me, I think learning is just kind of that nourishment to yourself. So I recently, starting like toward the end of last year, started taking my health very seriously. And so I go to a gym called Orange Theory Fitness, and there's a lot of locations kind of all across, I believe, the world now. And one of the things that they actually have on one of their walls is, think of like coming here as like a vitamin for yourself. And I really liked that. And to me, that's also kind of what learning is to me as well. So it's like that little vitamin that you do in order to grow and nourish kind of your mind, body, and soul. And that I really love that analogy. And that's what I'm going to say for this.
I love that. I love that. All right. So, Cara, if we go back to thinking when you were younger, maybe in elementary or middle school, what was it that you wanted to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a judge.
A judge?
Yeah, I really loved the law and judges, and I just thought that that would be a really awesome career. You didn't have to overthink what you were going to wear to work. You had the robe.
I love
but
that.
but yeah, I know. I was like, oh, that would be easy. Just put the robe on and sit there and chill. That'd be cool. But it actually, just to age myself a little bit, the O.J. Simpson trial happened when I was in middle school, and watching that, and I mean, that was just a big part of kind of what was going on in the world at the time. And I'll never forget, like in middle school, it was like on every TV, and watching how that judge handled that case. I was like, I don't want to be a part of the legal system. I was like, I don't want to be a judge anymore after seeing that. So
It's a little too
that it,
messy, right?
yeah. So after that, I actually, when I was in elementary school as well, I grew up on a farm, and we had horses and all this stuff. I was actually in a really bad horse accident when I was in, I believe it was 4th grade, and I fell off the horse. I had a seizure, like it was really
Oh my
bad.
gosh.
And so after kind of going through the judge phase, I was like, well, maybe I could be like a neurologist or a neurosurgeon, because obviously they meant a lot to me. And then when I got to high school, I took a biology class and saw some stuff, and I had to run to the bathroom because I got sick. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to work either. So here I'm having kind of this even pre-mid, like quarter life crisis of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And it's interesting because there's so much pressure on
Mm.
people in middle school, and I think it's gotten worse. I have a cousin that is currently in undergrad, and just the pressure on that you talk about on him of like trying to decide everything. So ended up, I also love reading and writing, so I ended up majoring in journalism in college, and I think it was a great major. I really enjoyed it, but Definitely not what I'm doing in my career, but I think there's a lot of good transferable skills there.
Okay. And you are a first generation college graduate,
I
right?
am, yes. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So
That's very cool.
yeah, it is very cool. And, my parents have done, they did very well for themselves. And, my dad was an entrepreneur and my mom was a federal employee. And so, yeah, there was, I had an awesome childhood, but it was never a discussion of if I was going to college. It was like, you're going to college. And so, they were really big on making sure that I got really good grades in high school and, focusing on my ACT score because they knew that that would help open the door for me to go to college more so than, having this financial thing. Because one thing I will say that I am beyond thankful to my family for is I did not have any student debt. So they
It's
really pushed
amazing.
me hard saying, listen, if you're going to go to college, you need to figure it out, and your grades and all this is a really good way to do it. But yeah, I had no financial debt, which is very kind of unusual for someone my age. And then after I graduated from undergrad, I kind of had the same mentality, even though I got the little wild hair. I wanted to go to law school again. So I took the LSAT, and law school, the endowments and scholarships were much more stingy, and so there was no way I could go to law school without taking on some debt. And my parents talked me out of it. They're like, "No, you're not going to do that." They're like, "You'll figure it out," but they're
Hmm.
like, we're not going to kind of support you on that. And it was kind of hard, but looking back, I'm like, wow, they were really awesome to kind of have that foresight and push me in a different direction.
Yeah. Our parents are smarter when we're older, right? They were
Yes.
smarter when we were younger, when we're older, and we realize that now.
But you're so emotional and you don't see it. And
Yeah.
I'm also an only child, and so I have one of those really close relationships with my parents. And it's funny, I married a middle, so his relationship
Middle.
is so different and than mine as an only. I talk to
Yeah.
my parents every single day. So I really care, even as an adult, what they think, and that validity of what I'm doing in my life is very important to me, of what my parents think. I don't
Okay.
care what anyone else thinks, but I care what my parents think.
So when you made the decision, so you knew you were going to college or university. It wasn't even really a decision for you at the time. When you went to go figure out where you were going to go and make that decision on journalism, communications, going that route, where did you decide to go to school and how did you make that decision?
Yeah, so this was also kind of a limiting decision as well. I grew up in Kentucky, and so Kentucky has this really awesome program. If you stay in the state of Kentucky to go to your higher education, you will actually get scholarships based on your high school GPA and your ACT or SAT score. So going out of state was totally not an option. There was a college in West Virginia I was kind of interested in called Marshall, and my parents were like, "Nope, you're not going there because you'll lose your keys money." And I'm like, "Oh, but," they're like, "No." So the scholarship, I think it was Kentucky Educational Excellence Scholarship, so KEYS is what it was called,
Okay.
and that is still a program that's in use today. So my cousin that is currently an undergrad, he also has keys money. So basically I knew that I needed to stay in the state of Kentucky. And so being a rebellious teenager, I was like, I want to go as far away as possible. So I went out to Bowling Green and Western Kentucky University, and
Okay.
I wanted to actually play volleyball. I played volleyball in high school and really enjoyed it, but it was like almost 4 hours away from where I grew up. I was like, that's a little too far. So I
Mhm.
settled. I ended up going to the University of Kentucky in Lexington, which ended up being about an hour and a half away from my parents' house in Eastern Kentucky.
So it's like just enough for both of you
Yes. Yep.
to get away but to be close enough if you need mom or dad.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
Okay.
I'm really thankful I picked that school. I was one of the only kids from my high school that went there, so I knew nobody.
Right.
It was very intimidating, but ended up, I met one of my best friends still today in at that college, and I met her like the first couple of days down there. So we've been best friends ever since, and ended
That's
up
awesome.
working out.
Awesome. So when you finished up with your program, what what were you thinking from there? Were you thinking, I need to go and get a job? I need to, like you had mentioned, possibly graduate school, law school. So what were you thinking? And then what did you decide?
Yeah, so it was actually the recession when I graduated. So there
Okay.
were pretty much no jobs to be had. I felt like the biggest loser on planet Earth because here I got this amazing college degree that my family was so proud of me getting, and then I couldn't get a job. And I was like, well, that's kind of the raw end of the deal. Like it's
Yeah.
usually, hey, you get this degree and you get this job, right? So ended up I worked some odd and end jobs. So my first job straight out of college. I worked for Aflac, and I sold insurance, and it was good. I mean, I learned a lot about dealing with the public and whatnot. And then I took another job at another insurance agency and doing kind of their books and like their database and that kind of stuff. But then ended up. I moved back from Lexington back home with my parents, and that's where I got a job in a call center because they had open interviews. It was advertised in the newspaper, and I was like, this beats $0 an hour. And had I not taken that job, I would have never found my career path. So after I worked there for a couple months, they're like, hey, you seem semi-professional and you can fog a mirror. Would you like to be promoted? And I was like, well, yes. So I got promoted into a role where a tiny bit of it was training. And after I did my first training session, I came home and I was like, Mom and Dad, I found what I want to do. Like, I want to do training. And they're like, yeah, 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 yeah. And I was like, no, no, I'm serious. Like, this is what I want to do. And that just kind of started my path, and I haven't looked back.
Okay. So at what point did you decide, you have this job? And I was even at that point when I was working, I had finished my undergrad and I went and immediately into grad school, but I was still working at the time. So at what point did you decide I want to look into this graduate school? I mean, you're learning about learning and development and that from a professional perspective, but when did you decide back to go back to school?
Yeah, so it was when I moved. So I all the time I was still like in northeastern Kentucky. I worked out of Huntington, West Virginia. So I was at that call center for about another year. I got recruited to come to Amazon, and so Amazon had a big customer service center in Huntington, and I worked out of there, and I got to do training and all kinds of wonderful stuff. But then in 2013, I fell in love, and I ended up. We had this conversation: Are you going to come to me, or am I going to come to you? And ended up I came to him, and so it was in Columbus. Ended up working out. It's all good. It's a happy story. So when I moved up here, I was interviewing for a lot of jobs, and one of the jobs I interviewed for was at a university, and it was in their facilities call center. So again, that telemarketing call
Mhm.
center background helped me kind of get that job where I would get to do the training and do a little bit of everything. And I'll never forget, like, one of the questions I like to ask is, why should I be interested in this role? I like to ask that
Mhm.
back to them because I want them to sell me, because I feel like it's a two-way street, and so many times people are
Yes.
so nervous about their own kind of impressions, but I want them to
Yeah.
sell me on why it's so great. And I'll never forget this. The gentleman interviewing me. He's like, "Wow," it's like, money's really not that good, but we have free tuition, and that was it for me. That was it.
Yep.
Because here, I've kind of told you my story of I'm scared of student debt. I was raised not to do student debt. And so then, I was like, sign me up. And so when I told my parents that's what I was going to do, like the first thing my mom's like, well, are you going back to school? I was like, yeah. So,
Well,
so
duh.
that's, yeah. So that's really what got me into that. And so I got almost immediately into a master's program, finished that really quickly, and then I looked around and said, hey, do y'all pay for a doctorate? And they're like, well, yeah, if you can get in. I was like, well, challenge accepted. So yeah, I did all my doctorate work too. So it
So
was it
tell
was a
us,
win-win.
what was your master's in?
Workforce development.
Okay. And
Yeah.
what is workforce development? I think I've
Workforce
heard of it.
development is to me like career development and career enrichment for people in the organization. So think professional development, career pathing, job task analysis, like all these like
Okay.
really awesome things that help empower people to level up in their career or do their jobs better. It's the way that I look at workforce development.
Okay. Do most do most people in workforce development go into jobs like in HRs for different
Yeah, yeah,
companies?
yeah. A
Okay.
lot of human resource development. A lot of people working in nonprofits. So some
Okay.
of my classmates worked at like the Goodwill and ran some of their career development programs, or
Got it.
would work at like various government agencies or for city boards or whatever. So a lot of kind of nonprofit, governmental folks. And then I worked at Ohio State, so it was all good.
Okay. So you had your master's degree and you accepted the challenge. Was that pretty quickly after you got your degree that you decided to go after your doctorate?
So I kind of took a year off. So initially
Okay.
what I did was, I the PhD program in workforce development, when I was wanting to get it, was actually closed. They weren't accepting any new students. And so I got kind of worried. I was like, well, can I do a different program? So Ohio State opened its online Masters of Learning Technology program, and so I applied for that. And I was like, if I can hack this, and this is, I can do this, then I can transfer those credits over to the doctorate program. And so that's what I did. I initially applied for the Masters of Learning Technology program, got accepted, started taking classes. I said, "Yep, I can handle this. This is good." And so then I had to reapply in the PhD program and transfer my credits over.
That is so smart. So smart. There's always these loopholes that people don't even think of. They think if they get a no, it's a no versus, hey, maybe I love that approach that you use there.
Yeah. And again, it gave me the option to still continue to learn, because I remember the
Mhm.
first semester after I graduated my master's, like I was like doing this, I had all this like time on my hands, and my partner, he's like, you can just like relax. I'm like, what's that mean? So
Right there with you.
yeah, I was ready to, I was really kind of foaming at the mouth to get back into to school. So
Yeah. So from the courses that you took in your PhD program, what are the ones that struck you that you were most passionate about?
ooh, definitely the instructional design classes. Although I will say, very candidly, I really hated that I had to take a beginner's class in that. That was extremely painful for me, because I was like, "Come on, like I got this." But the applied course I really liked, because I got to work on a team, and I was the only person on the team that had like the formal instructional design. But the group that I worked with, they're like friends for life now. Like we've just become so close. But we actually made a game for the College of Nursing for one of their classes, so I really liked the fact that we had a practical thing that we could work on instead of writing like a big long paper, but it was something
Mhm.
that we made together as a team. We were inspired by Carmen Sandiego. It was about how to ask good evidence based questions when you're asking about symptoms and things. And
Okay.
so we had this like little game where you had to figure out who the person in your office that was spreading the germs around was. And so this was definitely pre-pandemic. We had no idea about what was going to happen. Like this was back in 2015. Golly,
Uh-huh.
it's been that long ago. So yeah, we had no idea. We couldn't tell the future. But that's like where I met my really good friend like Anna Leach. And then, I met a lot of my really good friends in that program. And then when I transferred over into the PhD program, I actually became very close to a lot of the international students. So I would have like some of the international students actually come home with me to Kentucky to go to Thanksgiving so they could have a Thanksgiving. And
I
it
love
was
that.
really special. So I always like loved hanging out with the international students. And they're still, again, a lot of my really good friends even today.
Definitely. Definitely. So tell us where you are in that journey of your PhD working on that.
It's still kind of out there. I
You're
actually
farther along
switched.
than you think. I will say
Yeah,
that.
okay. I switched gears. So I actually am finishing up a book for ATD. So I had the opportunity to write a learning experience design book last year and then finish up this year. So that took a lot of my time, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I could write a book in a weekend." And my editor's like, "No, you can't." And it really was probably the hardest thing that I've ever done, because as you're writing, in the back of my mind, even though like I'm very confident in what I do, I still totally had imposter syndrome. I was like, what if
Mhm.
somebody reads this and thinks I'm just a load of baloney? Like, and you know, my editor did an awesome job. Like, yeah, well, everyone feels that way writing a book. It's not just you. Like, everyone goes through this, and I'm telling you that you are good enough, and this is going to
Aw.
inspire people. I was like, thank you, but
That's awesome. You need
yeah,
those cheerleaders
yes.
that support.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so fingers and toes crossed. I'm hoping to get back on track with everything.
Mhm.
But I couldn't say no to that opportunity to write the book because I knew that that would be a really big stepping stone in my career, and I really
Mhm.
wanted to take that on.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing sometimes too about being so passionate about learning and development, your own and other people's, is trying to figure out what's the right balance of
Yes.
I always like the plate spinning analogy and the big plates, the small plates, and which ones do you put down maybe temporarily, which ones do you let fall, that kind of thing. So that is hard. And I mean, even with you, you have to figure out, okay, this book is the right thing now. We'll pick this other one back up a little bit later.
Yeah, and it wasn't even a thought of, "Do I do this?" I was like, "Yes, and, I'll figure out kind of what this means for everything else," but to me, it was an absolute no-brainer. It's like, "Yes, this is a big deal. I need to do this."
Yeah. Uh, so let me ask you, as other people are on their learning journey and they're going along, what best practices or maybe tips would you give them as they're in the midst of their journey?
Oh, yeah, that's great. So I'll give you 3, all right? So this first one I can't take credit for. Jolt Ola, who works at Amazon, who is amazing, has this great tip that I heard him say, and I always try to give him credit. So I think the first thing on your learning journey is you want to connect with kind of 3 types of people. One, people that are kind of at the same level that you're at, whether that is, you're in school or you're in your first job or like you're in your first leadership role, whatever that is. You want to connect with people that's kind of at that same level. You want to connect with people about 6 months to a year ahead of you. So maybe that next role, or maybe they just graduated, or maybe whatever, because a lot of the things that they're going to be going through are things that you're likely going to be going through, and you might be able to learn from them. And then also, you want to connect with people at kind of the end of the finish line. Where is it that you want to go and grow? So if you want to be a chief learning officer, are you connected with other chief learning officers? If you want to be a manager, or you connected with other managers and learning from what it is that they're sharing. So that's kind of the first thing. I think connecting with other people in your industry, super important. Number two is, I think, setting your boundaries and knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at. That's a very hard conversation sometimes you have to have with yourself. But, I've been doing learning and development for, actually, this is year 15, if you can believe it,
Wow.
for me. And so even now, there's a lot of stuff that I don't know, and that's okay. But I am connected with people, or I know people that are like rock stars in it, and I've built that relational equity with them, that if I needed help, that they would help me if I would reach out. So I think there's that. And then
Mhm.
third is, don't compare your journey to other people. I think especially on social media, it is so easy to look and scroll and like, oh, that person has all their stuff together. Why can't I be more like them? You are comparing your whole life to someone's highlight reel. And you really need to set that expectation of, you know what, I'm doing the best that I can. I don't need to necessarily be like that person. Good for that person, bless them, happy for them, but I want to run my own race my own way. I think is really important.
I love that. I love that. And when you talk about boundaries, I think of even as an entrepreneur, it's picking your lane and figuring out what your niche is. And so many entrepreneurs have trouble with, but I want to help everybody. And it's like when you try to help everybody, help nobody. So it's
Yes.
narrowing down what is your focus, what can you do? And like you said, having people to refer, for other things, and you get really focused on what you need to do. I love the don't compare too. That's so hard. And it's so true about the highlight reels. It's the best of the
Yeah.
best that they're likely out there showing you for the most part.
It is, and I think the best thing about the world in general is the world is big enough for everyone to have a piece of success. And I feel like if you're connected with somebody and you kind of watch their struggles and then see them win, that's actually a little success for you too, if you think about it,
Mhm.
because look how great they're doing and they're connected with you, and maybe they might be able to help you further down the road. So I really think about shifting your mindset. Don't again compare yourself to other people, because you don't know what they're kind of battling like on the other side of stuff. You just never know.
Right, right. And I know with the pandemic, we've been opened up to a little bit of people's lives, like more on the personal front, but you absolutely don't know what's going on behind
Yeah.
the scenes. Yep. Yep. So one other thing I thought of when you were talking about connecting with different people at your level, a little bit further above, and then at like the end goal line. One of the things I know when I first started to get into networking, which I feel like I was later to the game and doing it, is that there's such a fear in reaching out to people because you don't want to look dumb, you don't want to say the wrong thing. Who in their right mind, like a chief learning officer, would want to be connected to me who's just getting started in the industry or, 2 years into it? What recommendations might you have for people and how they find those individuals and then like what they might say so they don't rub them the wrong way?
Yeah, I think it's all about building relationships, right? So, one thing that immediately turns me off in a message that I get is, "Hi, I need you to hop on a Zoom and do this for me." Well, I don't know you. I the great example, there was a guy, I wanna say last week or something, sent me this big thing about, "I have this Captivate file and blah," and I'm like, "You have never talked to me in your whole life." You know? So I think the first thing is connecting with them as a human, right? So take the
Mhm.
title, take the power, take everything out of it, but just connect with them as a human, right? And see if there are things like, are they from the same state as you are? Did they go to the same college you did? Or, did they work at a company that you've always kind of want to know, hey, what was that place like? Was that like the Willy Wonka chocolate factory? Whatever it is, but ultimately, I think it's also very important to be yourself. Don't be afraid to ask a silly question or whatever, but just don't expect them to do something for you out of the gate. Time and time and time again, if someone needs my help with something, if they are actually connected with me, I consider it more than if there is just some rando wasting like an email, which I don't know
Mhm.
why people do that. That's a little side note. I'm like, yeah, I don't know who you are. Like, why am I going to do whatever? Um, but I think just being yourself and connecting and realizing that that is another human on the other side is really, really critical. I have on the top of my profile no solicitations. I still get 50 to 75 a week of, hey, jump on this. And I'm like, can I have like a little spray that I can spray like LinkedIn? Like, leave me alone. I don't want to, but
Don't
no,
make
I just
people rush to click that block button.
well, so funny fact. Maybe I should tell you something. You can only block 1,000 people on LinkedIn.
That's sad that you had to find out that limit, right?
I might be there.
Yeah, definitely looking at their profile picture, maybe doing a Google search. And I feel like people that are not in the US are so much better about this than
Yes.
in the US. And I even had a call with somebody who took over a prior position I had in the company I'm in. And I said, when you connect with other people outside of the US, ask them how their day is. What's the weather like there? Ask them about their dog, if there's a dog in the WebEx or whatnot. And I said, they appreciate that, take time to breathe, kind of have that personal connection, and then move on. And it was hard for me at first when I started to, build those relationships because I'm used to you get on the phone, especially with it at work, go, 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 go. XYZ is what I need. But it caused me to, pause, take a step back, and it helped to build those relationships and make them so much stronger because of that.
Absolutely. And once you build
Yeah.
those relationships, that's when you're like, hey, I have this question, or I keep getting this roadblock. Once I have a relationship with somebody, they don't have to ask me for their time. Typically, I'm like, well, let's chat, or hey, can I call you, can I text however, what can I do to help? That's the difference. So instead of you asking them, after you've built a relationship, a lot of times they will just automatically help you. So that's a little pro tip as well.
Yeah, and I'm gonna tell this story too about how you and I met, because
Okay.
I think it's awesome, and I think we've only known each other, is it 3, maybe 4 years?
Yeah,
I can't
yeah, I guess
remember.
it has been 3 years. Yeah.
So I didn't know Cara at all. I hadn't even heard her name because I wasn't doing much in the L&D community, and, Central Ohio ATD had somehow I found out about it and its Association for Talent and Development, or Talent for Development, for those who didn't know, and they have local chapters everywhere, and I was like, "Oh, this is how I'll get out of my shell, I'll network with people." I'm very, very shy, or I was. I don't think I am so much anymore. I'm getting out of that. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to go to one of these in person. And they had a kickoff in January of the year I joined a few years back. And I go in and I didn't know anyone. I didn't think to look up profiles, try to connect with people even before I walked in the door. I go in there by myself. I'm so nervous. I'm sitting. People are very nice, introducing themselves. And Cara comes walking up to me and she's like, "Are you?" I can't remember if you called me doctor or you said you're Tracy Schroyer. And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "I want to talk to you about your PhD. Like, I'm looking into that. I'm thinking about that." And I thought to myself, holy shit, this girl knows about me. Like, she researched about me, and I'm just somebody coming to this event. Like, I don't even know at that point if, and maybe I did sign up as a member or right soon after that. But I was so impressed that you had taken the time to learn something about me so that you were able to connect with me in person. And ever since then, we have been connected and we've taken trips together, gone different places to different conferences or events. And Cara, kind of like you said, is it's an easy, oh, I'm willing to help you out. I'm willing to do something without even sometimes asking. And even like this episode, it's, hey, would you be interested in it? Absolutely. Like, when do I sign up? Where do I sign up? That kind of thing. So I appreciate that. And just modeling that for other people and showing them that that's the right way to go about building relationships. I really appreciate that in you.
Oh, stop it.
Yeah.
But no, I think that, especially people coming to something like a ATD chapter, when I went to my first meeting, I had a coworker that went with me, and it just so happened my very first meeting was Mike Taylor was speaking. And so I immediately just like gravitated to him, like, oh, you're so amazing. But he has been so good to me also in kind of my career and everything. But like you, I mean, I absolutely lived under a rock for most of my career, because when I was at Amazon, I was extremely well supported. I had a ton of smart coworkers. I thought my boss could walk on water. I mean, I was super well supported. And I went from this huge, amazing, super connected team to a team of two when I went to Ohio State. And I found out very quickly I didn't know half of the stuff that I thought I did. And I had a very rough time actually transitioning when I moved up here, because all I knew were my partner's family, and that was it. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have anything up here. And so, I really had to kind of, to your point, get out of my shell a little bit, because I was very used to this system and these colleagues that I had around me in my other job, and I didn't have any of that when I moved up here to Ohio. So I ended up, I had to build it. And my partner, he's like, yeah, it looks like you're having a hard time. Like, what can I do? He's like, this
Aw.
isn't you. He's like, I can tell this is not you. What is going on? And so that's why I ended up getting to be a part of Central Ohio ATD. And then, I wanted to run it because I really wanted to help other people, because I knew how awkward I felt when I
Yeah.
first came. And I took that very seriously. And then also, too, when I decided I wanted to transition into learning leadership in my day to day, I didn't have that opportunity. I will never forget, I had a performance review and everything was great. And they're like, oh, everything's fantastic. They're like, do you have any questions for me? And I said, yeah. I said, I'm really wanting to grow. I said, I want to transition. I'd like to be an ID manager, or, I told them, I want to be a chief learning officer. And I said, I'm really eager to take on stretch assignments. Is there any way I can manage a full project? Can I have direct reports? And I'm like talking, and I'm not kidding you, I saw this hat come up, right? And like, yeah, Carrie, you're great, but that's just not how we do it around here. Like we can't like promote you like that or do anything like that. Sorry. And I was defeated, but then something lit in me and I just had this epiphany. Well, who said that my leadership experience has to come through my 9 to 5?
Yep.
And so that's why I wanted to be president of Central Ohio ATD, because then I would have 3 years of managing people, projects, budgets, all of the things. And so then when I interviewed for my manager position that I took a couple of years ago, when they asked me those questions about dealing with difficult personalities and all that, I pulled from my experience from ATD, and they didn't bat an eyelash because I did it, right?
Right. Right. You bring up a great point too, because before I ever had management experience in I guess the title itself, because you can have leadership management experience outside of just a title. I had interviewed for a manager position in my 9 to 5, and the person interviewing me, I knew her, and I interviewed and I got the response, I'm not getting the job, which I was up against some really great people, and I was like, I get it, can you give me some feedback? And she said, well, I asked you if you had experience leading people, and you said no. And she's like, you're in this group, you do this, you do this. She goes, you don't have the title, but you have the experience. And she's like, you need to have that confidence in talking to that versus just being shut down when somebody asked you, do you have the experience, and thinking that is directly tied to the title. So great example for that. And if you're not finding it in your 9 to 5, absolutely look for opportunities outside of the 9 to 5. There's plenty out there. Volunteer, different associations, just a lot of different things out there.
Well, kudos to whoever gave you that feedback. I find that few and far between in a lot of organizations. So somebody that actually truly wants to help someone grow and shine. So kudos to whoever gave you that feedback. That's a good person.
Yes. Yes. All right. So, Cara, we're wrapping up our time together. So I just want to ask you, before I have one last question after this. So any other thoughts or comments you have about your learning journey or advice for other people before we go to the end?
Just my last thing is, don't expect an organization to take care of your professional learning and your learning journey for you. I truly feel like this is something that you have to maintain and you have to manage, because, when I first started my career, I just would always think, hey, if I go in and do a good job, all these wonderful opportunities will happen for me. And I think that's a really outdated mindset. I mean, truly, one of the best pieces of advice I got from a mentor of mine was change your mindset to being self employed. And so
Mhm.
I've had this mindset for about 3 years now, that if I'm having a really rotten day at work and it's a pattern and something's not going the way that I need it to, or I feel sick, that I can take my, pardon LeBron James, take my talent somewhere else and I can get another client. And so, really taking that power away from them, and putting the power back on me when it comes to my career, my learning journey, etc., has made all of the difference in the world. A lot of my anxiety that I had around it has pretty much went away, and I feel much more confident, in my career trajectory now.
I love that. We all have choices. Yep. All right. So, Cara, before we go for good this time, um, can you tell anybody who's listening and is not connected with you, what are some of the best ways to stay connected with you, follow you, all of those kinds of things?
Yep. So you can find me on LinkedIn, which is more professional Cara, at Cara North 11. And then you can find me on Twitter also at Cara North 11. But my Twitter is a little bit more me as a person. So there may be things on there about Orange Theory, Nick Jonas, Jack White, Apex Legends, Animal Crossing, all the stuff that I like outside of work. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cara. I appreciate your time today and sharing the information about your learning journey and how you have learned along the way and helped other people too. So thank you.
Thank you. It was great.
This podcast is brought to you by Upskill University. You can find more information about how to become part of the Upskill community for free, this and other episodes of the Through the Lens of Learning podcast, and more on the website at www.upskilluniversity.com. Thanks again for listening and have an awesome day.